Excuse me? No. I'm not doing this. I'm not sitting next to him.
Vanessa Whitmore shoved her handbag onto the empty seat and stared up at Malcolm Reed.
Sir, you need to find another seat.
Malcolm stood in the aisle, calm.
This is my seat. Check the boarding pass.
Vanessa gave a sharp laugh.
Come on. First class? Dressed like that?
Malcolm didn't move.
Please move your bag.
Her smile vanished.
Don't tell me what to do. I paid a fortune for this seat, and I'm not spending 6 hours trapped beside someone who makes me uncomfortable.
The cabin went quiet. Malcolm's voice stayed even.
I'm only asking you to clear the seat I paid for.
Vanessa leaned forward, raising her middle finger inches from his face.
Then ask someone else, because you're not sitting here.
Malcolm didn't flinch. Vanessa had no idea the man she was humiliating owned 75% of the company that paid her salary. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Malcolm Reed stepped through the first-class cabin door, his dark green button-down shirt wrinkled from the long drive to LAX. The small black duffel bag hung loosely from his shoulder. He moved with quiet purpose down the narrow aisle, checking seat numbers against his boarding pass. The cabin buzzed with the usual pre-flight energy. Passengers settled into leather seats, adjusting pillows and ordering drinks. Malcolm's eyes found his row. 3A. Window seat occupied by a woman in an expensive red dress and designer blazer. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, and diamond earrings caught the overhead lights. Vanessa Whitmore looked up from her phone as Malcolm approached. Her blue eyes swept over him quickly. The casual shirt, the worn duffel bag, his calm, patient expression. Her spine went rigid. Malcolm stopped beside row 3 and glanced at his boarding pass again. "Excuse me," he said quietly. "I believe I'm in 3B. Vanessa's mouth fell open slightly. She stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. Around them, other passengers continued their conversations, unaware of the tension building. "No," Vanessa said, her voice rising above the cabin noise. "Absolutely not." Malcolm blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Tiana," Vanessa called sharply toward the front of the cabin. "Tiana, I need you right now." Flight attendant Tiana Brooks hurried over, her professional smile in place. She was a petite woman with kind eyes and braided hair pulled back neatly. "Yes, Ms. Whitmore. How can I help you?" Vanessa pointed directly at Malcolm. "This man is trying to sit beside me. I refuse. I paid full price for first class, and I will not be made uncomfortable." Tiana's smile wavered. She looked between Vanessa and Malcolm, confusion creeping across her face. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass?" Malcolm handed over the paper without a word. Tiana examined it carefully, then looked up at him apologetically. "You're correct, sir. Seat 3B is yours." "See?" Malcolm said gently. "There's no mistake." Vanessa's face flushed red. "There has to be a mistake. Someone like him doesn't belong in first class. Check again." Passengers in nearby rows turned their heads. Conversations stopped. The air grew thick with uncomfortable silence. Malcolm remained perfectly still. His jaw tightened slightly, but his voice stayed calm. "Someone like me?" "Don't play innocent," Vanessa snapped. "You know exactly what I mean. Look at you. That shabby shirt, that cheap bag. You probably used points or got some kind of upgrade error." Tiana stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Ms. Whitmore, please. The gentleman has a valid boarding pass for that seat. Perhaps we could—" "No!" Vanessa's voice carried through the entire cabin now. "I will not sit next to him. Period. Find him somewhere else to sit, or I'm filing a complaint against this entire crew." Malcolm's hands remained at his sides. He didn't raise his voice or show anger. But something flickered behind his eyes. Years of this same treatment, the same assumptions, the same humiliation. "Ma'am," Tiana said carefully, "I understand you're concerned, but—" "Concerned?" Vanessa stood up abruptly, her red dress swishing. "I'm disgusted. I pay thousands of dollars for these flights, and you people let anyone wander into first class now? What's next? Are you going to start selling seats to homeless people?" Other passengers stared openly now. Some pulled out their phones. The cabin fell dead silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Malcolm stood perfectly still in the aisle, his boarding pass still in Tiana's hands. He looked at Vanessa with steady, unblinking eyes. Vanessa pointed at the empty leather seat beside hers with a manicured finger. "He is not sitting there." The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Malcolm remained motionless, his boarding pass still in Tiana's trembling hands. Other passengers twisted in their seats, phones appearing as the tension thickened. Vanessa's eyes narrowed to slits. The flush in her cheeks deepened to an angry crimson that spread down her neck. She looked Malcolm up and down with obvious disgust, taking in every detail of his appearance like she was cataloging evidence. "Look at him," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "That wrinkled shirt probably came from some discount store. Those shoes look like they've walked through every ghetto in Los Angeles. And that pathetic little bag, what's in there? Your life savings?" Malcolm's expression remained unchanged. He didn't flinch, didn't defend himself. His calm only seemed to fuel Vanessa's rage. "You probably saved up for months to afford this ticket," she continued, her voice getting louder and more cutting. "Or maybe you used some government program, some charity handout. Because there's no way someone like you earned the right to sit beside someone like me." A businessman across the aisle pulled out his phone and started recording. The red recording light blinked as he captured every word. Tiana tried again, her professional training warring with her obvious discomfort. "Ms. Whitmore, please lower your voice. Other passengers—" "Other passengers what?" Vanessa whirled on her. "Other passengers don't want to sit next to him either. Look around. Nobody wants to be near people who don't belong here. This is first class, not some bus station." Malcolm finally spoke, his voice steady and quiet. "I'm not going anywhere, ma'am. This is my seat." Those simple words sent Vanessa over the edge, her face contorted with fury. She stepped closer to Malcolm, invading his personal space. The scent of her expensive perfume clashed with the bitter anger radiating from her. "Your seat?" she screeched. "Your seat? You don't get to have seats like this. You don't get to sit beside people like me. You're probably some gang member or drug dealer who stumbled into money. That's the only way your kind could afford first class." Passengers gasped audibly now. A woman in 2A covered her mouth in shock. The businessman kept recording, his face grim with disapproval. Not at Malcolm, but at Vanessa's escalating cruelty. Malcolm's hands remained at his sides. His breathing stayed even, but his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly as each insult landed. "I'm calling security," Vanessa declared, pulling out her phone. "I'm having you removed from this aircraft, and when I'm done, I'm calling the airline and filing complaints about every single crew member who allowed this to happen." She waved her phone in Malcolm's face like a weapon. "You think you can just walk onto planes and sit wherever you want? You think you're entitled to the same treatment as paying customers? Well, you're wrong." Then she did something that made the entire cabin freeze. Vanessa raised her right hand directly in front of Malcolm's face. She extended her middle finger and held it there, inches from his nose, her face twisted with malicious satisfaction. "This is what I think of you and your kind," she snarled. The collective gasp from passengers was audible. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." The businessman's phone captured it all, the red recording light steady as Vanessa held her obscene gesture. Malcolm stared at her finger, then looked directly into her eyes. He said nothing. His silence seemed to unnerve her more than any response could have. Tiana stepped forward quickly, her face pale with shock. She positioned herself between Malcolm and Vanessa, her hands shaking slightly. "Ma'am, that's completely inappropriate," Tiana said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please return to your seat immediately." Vanessa lowered her hand slowly, a triumphant smirk spreading across her face. She looked around the cabin, at the staring passengers and recording phones, as if their attention proved she was right. "There," she said with satisfaction. "Now everyone knows what we're dealing with here." Tiana turned to Malcolm, her eyes filled with apology and embarrassment. She spoke in a gentle, respectful tone that contrasted sharply with Vanessa's cruelty. "Sir, I'm so sorry about this situation. Would you allow me to upgrade you to one of our premium seats near the front? It's quieter there, and you'll have more privacy." Malcolm nodded once, his dignity intact despite the humiliation he'd just endured. Tiana quietly escorted Malcolm toward the front of the aircraft, while Vanessa settled back into her window seat with a smirk, as if she had won some important victory. The aircraft leveled off at cruising altitude, the cabin lights dimmed to a soft amber glow. Vanessa settled into her window seat with a glass of champagne, her earlier satisfaction still warming her chest. She had handled that situation perfectly, she told herself. Sometimes people needed to be reminded of their place. She sipped her champagne and gazed out at the endless expanse of clouds below, feeling victorious. The flight attendants moved quietly through the cabin, their earlier tension now replaced by professional calm. Vanessa barely noticed them. Her mind was already focused on the important meeting waiting for her in New York. 3 rows behind her, 2 men in expensive suits spoke in low voices. Vanessa paid them no attention at first, too absorbed in her own thoughts to care about other passengers' conversations. But their voices carried just enough for certain words to reach her ears. "The shareholder meeting tomorrow is going to be explosive," one of them said, his tone serious and concerned. "Reed called it with less than 24 hours' notice. That's never happened before." Vanessa's ears perked up. She knew that name. Everyone at Auraline International knew that name, though few had ever seen the man behind it. "Malcolm Reed owns 75% of the company," the second executive continued, his voice dropping even lower. "When he wants something done, it gets done. No questions asked." Vanessa turned slightly in her seat, pretending to adjust her position while actually trying to hear better. These men were clearly Auraline employees. She recognized the first one now, Marcus Webb from the finance department. The second man she didn't know, but his expensive watch and confident posture suggested he was high-level management. "I heard he's been reviewing personnel files personally," Marcus said, his voice tight with worry. "Going back years, looking at disciplinary actions, complaints, settlements, everything." The unknown executive shifted uncomfortably. "That's what concerns me. Reed has always been hands-off with day-to-day operations. If he's suddenly diving into personnel matters, someone's about to get burned." Vanessa felt a chill run down her spine. Personnel files, complaints. She had weathered a few storms over the years, employees who couldn't handle strong leadership, people who mistook firmness for unfairness. But those situations had been handled quietly, professionally, swept under the rug where they belonged. "The crazy thing is," Marcus continued, "most employees have never even seen him. He travels constantly, keeps a low profile, dresses like a regular person, flies commercial instead of taking the company jet. You could sit next to Malcolm Reed on a plane and never know it." Vanessa's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. A terrible realization began creeping into her mind like ice water in her veins. "Speaking of which," the unknown executive said quietly, "isn't that him up there?" He nodded discreetly toward the front of the cabin, where premium seats offered more privacy and space. Vanessa followed his gaze and felt her world tilt off its axis. There, seated calmly by a window, looking out at the clouds with the same composed expression he'd worn during her tirade, was the man she had just humiliated. The man whose middle finger she had shoved in his face. The man she had called unworthy of sitting in first class. Malcolm Reed, the majority owner of Auraline International. The man who controlled her entire career, her future, her life. Vanessa's champagne glass slipped from her nerveless fingers, spilling golden liquid across her expensive red dress. She didn't notice. Her mind was reeling, replaying every cruel word she had spoken, every degrading gesture she had made. The blood drained from her face as the full magnitude of her mistake crashed over her. She had to fix this. She had to apologize, explain, make him understand. It was all a misunderstanding. She stood on unsteady legs and walked quickly toward the front cabin, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it over the aircraft's engines. Other passengers glanced up as she passed, some recognizing her from the earlier scene. Malcolm didn't look up as she approached his seat. He continued watching the clouds, his expression peaceful and untroubled. When she stopped beside him, clearing her throat softly, he turned toward her with mild curiosity. "Mr. Reed," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, all her earlier arrogance completely gone. "I had no idea who you were. I'm so terribly sorry about what happened earlier. It was all just a misunderstanding." Malcolm studied her face for a long moment, his dark eyes calm and measuring. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet and controlled, but there was something in his tone that made her stomach drop. "Ms. Whitmore," he said calmly, "I recognized you the moment you walked onto this plane." Vanessa's knees nearly buckled. The way he said her name with such quiet certainty told her everything she needed to know. This wasn't a chance encounter. This wasn't an accident. "You knew?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "You knew who I was when you showed me exactly who you are?" Malcolm's voice remained steady, almost conversational. "Yes, Ms. Whitmore, I knew exactly who you are." He shifted in his seat to face her fully, his movements deliberate and controlled. Other passengers in the premium cabin were trying not to stare, but Vanessa could feel their eyes on her. "3 weeks ago, I reopened several employee files that had been buried in our corporate archives," Malcolm continued, his tone matter-of-fact. "Complaints against you dating back 5 years, intimidation tactics, biased promotion practices, systematic retaliation against employees who dared to speak up." Vanessa's mouth went dry. She glanced around nervously, then leaned closer, lowering her voice to an urgent whisper. Those complaints were settled, legally resolved. There was never any admission of wrongdoing. Malcolm's expression didn't change. "Settlement is not the same as justice, Ms. Whitmore." "I don't know what you think you're doing," Vanessa hissed, her panic making her voice sharper. "But I have lawyers, good ones. This conversation could be considered harassment of a senior employee." Near the galley, Tiana was checking passenger requests when fragments of their conversation reached her ears. She had been trying to give them privacy, but something in Vanessa's tone made her pause. The flight attendant pretended to organize supplies while listening more carefully. Malcolm's laugh was soft and completely without humor. "Are you threatening me, Ms. Whitmore? On a plane full of witnesses, after what just happened in front of cameras?" "I'm protecting myself from whatever vendetta you think you're pursuing," Vanessa shot back, though her voice lacked its earlier fire. One incident doesn't justify targeting a senior executive. One incident? Malcolm's eyebrows rose slightly. Ms. Whitmore, what happened today wasn't an incident. It was confirmation. Tiana's blood chilled as she realized she was hearing something much bigger than an airplane confrontation. The careful way Malcolm spoke, the fear creeping into Vanessa's voice, the mention of buried files and complaints. This was about more than just a seat assignment. Confirmation of what? Vanessa demanded, though she seemed afraid to hear the answer. Malcolm leaned back in his seat, his composure unshakable. That every single complaint filed against you was true. That you create hostile environments wherever you go. That you believe your position gives you the right to judge people based on how they look. You can't prove any of that, Vanessa said desperately. Those files are sealed. Those cases were closed. Files can be unsealed, Ms. Whitmore. Cases can be reopened, especially when new evidence emerges. Malcolm's voice dropped even lower. But you're not my biggest concern. Vanessa blinked, confusion replacing some of her panic. What do you mean? The people who protected you, the executives who buried those complaints, the managers who enabled your behavior for years. Malcolm's eyes hardened slightly. They're the ones who turned our company into a place where employees stay silent rather than speak truth. Tiana felt a chill run down her spine. She thought about all the times she'd heard crew members whisper about difficult passengers, about complaints that disappeared, about people who learned to keep their heads down rather than report problems. I don't understand, Vanessa stammered. Graham Pike has always supported whatever keeps the company profitable and scandal-free, Malcolm interrupted quietly. Until now. The plane's engines shifted pitch as they began their descent toward New York. Vanessa gripped the back of his seat, her knuckles white against the leather. What are you going to do? She whispered. Malcolm turned back toward the window, watching the city lights grow larger below them. His next words were so quiet that Tiana had to strain to hear them, but they hit like a physical blow. You confirmed everything. The arrival gate at JFK buzzed with the usual chaos of a cross-country flight's end. Passengers shuffled through the narrow jet bridge, pulling carry-on bags and checking phones that had been silent for 6 hours. But something felt different tonight. Whispered conversations carried an electric tension, and more than one person held up their phone screen to compare faces with fellow travelers. Vanessa moved through the crowd like a hunted animal. Her designer heels clicked rapidly against the terminal floor as she pushed past slower passengers, her red blazer now wrinkled from hours of nervous fidgeting. Every few steps, she glanced over her shoulder, watching for Malcolm or anyone else who might recognize her. Her phone buzzed with notifications she refused to check, social media alerts, news pings, messages from colleagues. Each buzz made her stomach clench tighter. She ducked into an empty gate area and dialed with shaking fingers. Graham, thank God you answered. Vanessa! Graham Pike's voice came through crisp and controlled, the tone of a man accustomed to handling crises. I've been watching the situation develop. It's everywhere, isn't it? Vanessa whispered, pressing the phone closer to her ear. The video, the headlines, everything. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. 3 major news outlets have picked it up in the last hour. Graham's voice remained steady, but she could hear keyboard clicks in the background. Aviation blogs are calling it the worst first-class meltdown of the year. Vanessa closed her eyes, feeling the world tilt around her. Graham, I need you to understand something. The man I was sitting next to, I know exactly who he was. Graham cut her off. Which is why you're not saying another word to anyone until you get here. No statements, no apologies, no social media, nothing. But people are calling me racist, Graham. They're saying I should be fired. The company's phones are probably ringing off the hook. The company will weather this. We've handled worse scandals. Graham's tone shifted slightly, becoming more authoritative. Come directly to headquarters. Use the garage entrance on 42nd. We'll figure out damage control once you're here. Meanwhile, back at the gate, Malcolm remained seated in the waiting area while other passengers continued filing out. He watched Vanessa's hurried exit without expression, his duffel bag resting calmly beside his chair. Tiana approached hesitantly, her flight attendant uniform now feeling heavier than usual. She'd changed out of her service jacket, but her name tag still read Brooks in small black letters. "Mr. Reed?" Her voice was soft, uncertain. "You wanted to speak with me?" Malcolm looked up, his face kind but serious. "I need an official incident report, Ms. Brooks. What you witnessed today, what you heard, everything that happened from your professional perspective." Tiana's hands twisted together nervously. "Sir, I'm not sure I should get involved in whatever this is becoming. I have a job to protect, a career." "I understand your concern," Malcolm said gently, "but sometimes protecting our jobs means protecting the truth first. What if Aureline retaliates against me? What if they say I mishandled the situation? What if they claim I should have done more to prevent the confrontation?" Malcolm studied her face for a long moment. "Ms. Brooks, how long have you been with the airline?" 12 years, Tiana answered automatically. 12 years of handling difficult passengers, managing conflicts, keeping people safe at 30,000 feet. You know the difference between right and wrong better than most people ever will. Malcolm's voice carried quiet conviction. What happened today wasn't a passenger service issue. It was something much bigger. Tiana looked toward the gate where Vanessa had disappeared, then back at Malcolm. She thought about the cruel words, the raised middle finger, the way Vanessa had treated another human being like garbage simply based on appearance. "I'll write the report," she said finally. "Everything I saw, everything I heard." Meanwhile, Vanessa had made it to baggage claim, still clutching her phone. The automatic doors slid open, revealing the chaos of New York arrival traffic. Yellow cabs honked, buses rumbled, and people moved in streams toward their destinations. But something was wrong. A cluster of people with cameras and microphones stood near the taxi stand, scanning arriving passengers with predatory attention. "Vanessa Whitmore," a woman's voice called out sharply. "Channel 7 News. Can you comment on the viral video from tonight's flight?" Vanessa's blood turned to ice. They'd identified her already. Her face, her name, her company. Everything was public now. "Ms. Whitmore," another voice joined the first. "Are you sorry for your behavior? Will Aureline International be taking disciplinary action?" She pulled her phone closer and tried to disappear into the crowd, but it was too late. Camera flashes began popping like miniature lightning strikes. Her face would be on every news program by morning. A black sedan pulled up to the curb with perfect timing. The back door opened, and Vanessa dove inside without looking back. As the car pulled away from the terminal, her phone buzzed with a text from Graham. "We protect ourselves first." Vanessa stared at the message, her hands trembling as Manhattan's lights blurred past the window. The words felt less like reassurance and more like a warning. The 42nd floor of the Aureline International building buzzed with nervous energy. Glass conference rooms lined the executive wing, each one offering commanding views of Manhattan's afternoon skyline. But today, the view was the last thing on anyone's mind. Graham Pike stood at the head of the largest conference room, his silver hair perfectly styled despite the chaos of the past few hours. His navy suit was pressed, his tie straight, but his jaw carried the tension of a man watching his carefully constructed world begin to crack. "Close the door," Graham ordered as the last executive entered. 7 senior vice presidents filled the leather chairs around the polished table. Legal counsel sat at the far end, tablets and phones spread before them like weapons. And there, in the chair closest to Graham, sat Vanessa Whitmore. She had changed from her airplane clothes into a black business suit, but the strain showed in her face. Her makeup couldn't hide the exhaustion in her eyes or the way her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. "All right, people," Graham began, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to controlling rooms full of powerful people. "We have a situation that needs immediate management. The incident on today's flight has gone viral. Our stock dropped 2% in after-hours trading. The board is asking questions." The legal team leader, a sharp-faced woman named Patricia Coleman, spoke first. "We've reviewed the video footage circulating online. From a liability standpoint, we can frame this as a misunderstanding between 2 passengers that escalated unnecessarily." "Exactly," Graham said, pointing at her approvingly. Vanessa was stressed, traveling after a long week. The seating arrangement was unclear. Things got heated, as they do on airplanes. We issue a statement emphasizing our commitment to customer service and diversity. We move on. Vanessa nodded quickly, desperately. "It was just a misunderstanding. I was tired. I'd been working 18-hour days all week. I wasn't thinking clearly. Anyone could have what?" The voice came from the conference room entrance. Every head turned. Malcolm Reed stood in the doorway, still wearing his simple green shirt and carrying his duffel bag. He looked calm, almost casual, but his presence filled the room like electricity before a storm. "Mr. Reed," Graham said, his tone shifting to forced politeness. "I wasn't expecting you today." "I'm sure you weren't." Malcolm stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. "Please, continue. You were explaining how anyone could have done what Ms. Whitmore did." The room fell silent. Vanessa stared at the table, unable to meet Malcolm's eyes. The other executives looked anywhere but at the man who controlled their futures. "Malcolm," Graham said, trying to regain control, "I know emotions are running high after today's incident, but we need to think about the bigger picture here. Auraline employs 40,000 people. We have shareholders, investors, contracts worth billions of dollars. One unfortunate moment shouldn't—" "One unfortunate moment?" Malcolm's voice remained quiet, but something in his tone made everyone lean back slightly. "Is that what we're calling it now?" He moved to the empty chair at the opposite end of the table from Graham. "I want an independent ethics investigation. Full audit of all discrimination complaints filed in the past 5 years. External investigators, not our internal legal team." Patricia Coleman cleared her throat. "Mr. Reed, with respect, launching an investigation now would only generate more negative publicity. It would look like we're admitting wrongdoing." "Maybe because we are." Graham stood up, spreading his hands in a gesture meant to look reasonable. "Malcolm, I understand you're upset. What happened on that plane was inappropriate, and Vanessa knows that. But destroying one of our most senior executives over a single incident isn't justice. It's revenge." Vanessa looked up for the first time, her eyes filling with calculated tears. "Mr. Reed, I made a mistake. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. But I've given 15 years of my life to this company. I've built programs, mentored employees, delivered results. I don't deserve to have my entire career destroyed because I had a bad day." Malcolm studied her face with the intensity of a scientist examining a specimen. "Ms. Whitmore, how many employees have you fired in the past 3 years?" "I don't see how that's—" 37, Malcolm answered for her. "I've been reviewing the files. 37 people lost their jobs under your direct supervision. 28 of them were people of color. Care to explain that statistical anomaly? The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Vanessa's mouth opened and closed without sound. Graham stepped forward, his diplomatic mask beginning to slip. Those were performance-based decisions. We have documentation for every termination. Suggesting anything else is what? Malcolm stood slowly, his calm exterior finally showing cracks. Is the truth? Is uncomfortable? Is going to cost us money? He looked around the table at faces that suddenly couldn't meet his gaze. Let me explain something to all of you. Hiding abuse doesn't make it go away. It makes it grow. It makes it spread. And when it finally comes out, and it always comes out, the cost is 10 times higher than dealing with it honestly from the beginning. Graham's face flushed red. You're talking about destroying careers, Malcolm. You're talking about damaging a company that your own father helped build. My father built this company to create opportunities, not to protect people who destroy them. Malcolm's voice carried a finality that made several executives shift uncomfortably in their seats. The room fell into tense silence. Outside the glass walls, employees moved through the hallway, unaware that the future of their company was being decided just feet away. Graham walked slowly to the window, his back to the room. When he turned around, his expression had changed completely. The diplomatic mask was gone, replaced by something colder and more calculating. "Vanessa," he said quietly, "I think you and I need to have a private conversation." The temporary office felt smaller than it should have. Malcolm sat behind a mahogany desk that belonged to some mid-level executive who'd cleared out for the evening. Papers covered every surface. Coffee cups balanced on file folders. The overhead lights cast harsh shadows across documents that told stories of broken careers and buried complaints. Elena Marcus sat across from him, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she flipped through another personnel file. At 43, she'd seen enough corporate corruption to fill several lifetimes. Her black hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her dark blazer showed the wrinkles of a 12-hour workday. "This pattern goes back 7 years," she said without looking up. "Same departments, same complaints, same results." She tossed a folder onto the growing pile between them. "Nothing." Malcolm rubbed his temples. The numbers were worse than he'd imagined. Complaint after complaint, buried under layers of legal settlements and non-disclosure agreements. Names he recognized. Faces he remembered from company events who'd suddenly disappeared one day. His phone buzzed. Another email. "That's the 15th one, in 2 hours," Elena observed. "Word is spreading fast." Malcolm opened the message. A woman named Sarah Kim, former accounting supervisor. She'd seen the airplane video. She wanted to share her story about Vanessa, about retaliation, about fear. The phone rang. Malcolm hesitated, then picked up. "Malcolm Reed." "Mr. Reed?" The voice was shaky, uncertain. "This is Rochelle Avery. I used to work for your company. I saw what happened on that plane, and I need to talk to you." Elena looked up sharply. She mouthed the name. "Rochelle Avery?" Malcolm nodded. He remembered the file. "Ms. Avery, of course. How can I help you?" "She destroyed me." The words came out in a rush, as if Rochelle had been holding them back for years. "Vanessa Whitmore destroyed my life, and everyone just watched it happen." Malcolm put the phone on speaker. Elena leaned forward, pen ready. "I was a rising manager in business development," Rochelle continued. "Good reviews, promotions. I thought I had a future there. Then I reported her." "Reported what?" Malcolm asked gently. "She was blocking promotions for black employees, openly. In meetings, she'd say things like, 'We need to be careful about optics,' or Some clients prefer a certain aesthetic. When I documented it and sent it to HR, she went after me. Elena's pen moved quickly across her notepad. Malcolm felt his chest tighten. First, my projects got reassigned, then my team was restructured. Suddenly, every report I submitted had quality issues. Every client meeting I ran had communication problems. Within 6 months, I was on a performance improvement plan. Did HR investigate your complaint? Elena asked. Rochelle laughed bitterly. HR told me I was being overly sensitive and needed to adjust my perspective. They said Vanessa was just demanding excellence. When I pushed back, they started building a case against me. Malcolm's hands clenched into fists. The documents on his desk proved every word. HR had received Rochelle's complaint, documented it, and then helped Vanessa systematically destroy her career. I lost my job 3 months later, Rochelle said quietly. Terminated for attitude issues and failure to meet performance standards. They made sure I couldn't get unemployment benefits, couldn't get references. I had to take a part-time retail job just to keep my apartment. What about your health insurance? Elena asked. Gone. I couldn't afford my medications for 4 months. Had to choose between rent and doctor visits. Rochelle's voice broke. I almost lost everything because I tried to do the right thing. Malcolm stared at the wall, fury building behind his calm exterior. The documents proved that senior leadership knew. They'd seen the complaint. They'd watched Vanessa retaliate. And they'd done nothing. Ms. Avery, Malcolm said carefully, would you be willing to tell this story officially? On the record? Silence stretched across the phone line. Malcolm could hear Rochelle breathing, weighing the risk. I'm scared, she admitted. She has powerful friends. If I speak up again... She won't hurt anyone else, Malcolm said. I promise you that. Elena caught his eye and shook her head slightly. They both knew promises were dangerous in situations like this. I'll think about it, Rochelle said finally. But Mr. Reed? She's not the only one. There are others. Lots of others. The call ended. Malcolm set the phone down and looked at Elena. Her expression was grim. We need living witnesses, Elena said. Documents are evidence, but juries connect with people, with stories, with pain they can see and feel. Malcolm nodded. How many others do you think are out there? Based on these files? Dozens. Maybe more. Elena removed her glasses and rubbed her eyes. But here's the problem. Graham Pike has resources, money, lawyers, private investigators. The moment he realizes what we're doing, he'll start making phone calls, offering settlements, making threats. Then we move fast. How fast? Malcolm looked at his watch. Nearly 9 o'clock. Elena, I need you to arrange secret interviews. Tonight, if possible. Tomorrow morning at the latest? The hotel meeting room felt like a safe house. Malcolm chose the Madison Arms specifically because it sat 3 blocks from Auralane headquarters, but felt worlds away. No corporate logos on the walls, no glass conference tables, just neutral beige carpet and simple chairs around a small wooden table. Elena arrived first, carrying a leather briefcase and 2 cups of coffee. She set up a digital recorder and spread legal pads across the table. Her movements were precise, methodical. This meeting would determine whether they had a case or just angry complaints. Malcolm entered 5 minutes early, wearing a dark gray suit instead of his usual casual clothes. Today required authority. Gravitas. He needed Rochelle to see him as someone who could actually deliver justice, not just promises. At exactly 9 o'clock, Rochelle Avery walked through the door. Malcolm had imagined her differently. The complaint files described a rising manager with leadership potential and glowing performance reviews. The woman who entered looked tired, worn down. Her black blazer was professional but showed signs of age. Her shoes were polished but not expensive. Everything about her appearance whispered struggle, but her eyes burned with determination. "Ms. Avery," Malcolm stood and extended his hand. "Thank you for coming." Rochelle shook his hand firmly. "Mr. Reed, I saw what she did to you on that plane. Made me sick to watch it. Please, sit." Malcolm gestured to the chair across from him. "I know this isn't easy." Rochelle sat down and immediately pulled a manila folder from her purse. "I brought copies, everything I kept." She spread documents across the table like evidence in a trial. Email printouts, performance reviews, meeting notes. Each page told part of the same story. Systematic retaliation disguised as legitimate business decisions. Elena leaned forward, scanning the papers. "These emails show Vanessa blocked your promotion to regional director." 3 times, Rochelle said bitterly. "She told HR I wasn't management material, said I had attitude problems and couldn't handle pressure." Malcolm read over Elena's shoulder. One email made his stomach turn. Vanessa had written to Graham Pike directly. "Rochelle continues pushing the diversity agenda instead of focusing on actual work. I recommend we find someone more aligned with company values." "What happened after you filed the formal complaint?" Elena asked. Rochelle's jaw tightened. "Everything changed overnight. Suddenly my work wasn't good enough. My reports had errors that nobody could explain. My team meetings got canceled. My office got moved to the basement level." "The basement?" Malcolm frowned. "Storage area next to the mailroom. No windows. Broken air conditioning. They said it was temporary space reallocation." Rochelle laughed without humor. "I stayed there for 2 months before they fired me." Elena made notes quickly. "Did Graham Pike's office contact you directly?" "His assistant called the day after I filed the complaint. Said Mr. Pike wanted to handle things quietly to protect my reputation. She suggested I withdraw the complaint and accept a lateral transfer to our Denver office." "You refused?" "Of course I refused. Denver was a demotion disguised as a promotion. Smaller territory, lower commission structure, no advancement opportunities." Rochelle pulled out another document. "So they started building a paper trail." Malcolm studied the performance review in his hands. Every previous evaluation rated Rochelle as exceeds expectations or outstanding. The final review, dated 1 week before her termination, suddenly listed multiple failures and behavioral concerns. "This is completely fabricated," Malcolm said quietly. "They needed documentation to justify firing me without severance," Rochelle explained. "Vanessa personally wrote that final review. She made up incidents that never happened, claimed I was disrespectful in meetings I never attended." Elena looked up from her legal pad. "Did you consider legal action?" "With what money? They contested my unemployment benefits. I was fighting just to pay rent." Rochelle's voice cracked slightly. "Graham's office sent a message through my former supervisor. If I pursued litigation, they'd make sure I never worked in hospitality again. Anywhere." The room fell silent. Malcolm stared at the evidence spread before him, feeling something shift inside his chest. This wasn't just about airplane incidents or viral videos. This was about power used to crush people who couldn't fight back. "Ms. Avery," Malcolm said carefully, "I owe you an apology." "For what?" "I owned 75% of that company when they destroyed your career. I should have known. Should have been paying attention." Rochelle studied his face for a long moment. "Apologies don't pay medical bills, Mr. Reed. Apologies don't get my reputation back." Malcolm nodded slowly. "You're right. So what are you going to do about it?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Malcolm felt the weight of every document on that table, every ruined career, every silenced voice, every time power had been used to protect the wrong people. "I'm going to fight," Malcolm said quietly, "not just for justice, for accountability, for making sure this never happens to anyone else." Rochelle leaned back in her chair, studying him. "You better mean that, because the moment word gets out that I'm talking, they'll come for me again." Elena's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen and frowned. "Text from our contact at Oraline. Someone's been asking questions about former employees." Malcolm's expression darkened. "They know." Across town, Vanessa Whitmore sat in her corner office, staring at a message from her assistant. "Rochelle Avery seen entering Madison Arms Hotel this morning with unidentified man in gray suit." Vanessa's hands trembled as she reached for her phone and dialed Graham Pike's direct line. "Graham," she said when he answered, "Rochelle is talking." The Oraline boardroom felt different that afternoon. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany table where Malcolm had laid out his evidence like a prosecutor building a case. Board members sat in uncomfortable silence as Malcolm walked them through each document. Performance reviews that changed overnight, email chains showing deliberate retaliation, settlement agreements designed to silence victims rather than address problems. "This is not about one incident on an airplane," Malcolm said, his voice steady but forceful. "This is about a culture that protects abusers and punishes anyone brave enough to speak up." Board member Sarah Montgomery, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, picked up Rochelle's fabricated final review. "These performance issues listed here, they're dated after she filed her discrimination complaint?" "1 week after," Elena confirmed from her seat beside Malcolm. "Every previous evaluation shows outstanding performance. Then suddenly, she's incompetent and insubordinate." Another board member, David Torres, shook his head in disgust. "This is textbook retaliation." Graham Pike sat at the head of the table, his usual smooth confidence cracking under pressure. "These are serious accusations based on he said, she said complaints from disgruntled former employees." "Are you calling Miss Avery a liar?" Malcolm asked quietly. "I'm saying people who lose their jobs often blame others instead of examining their own failures." Elena slid another document across the table. "Then explain this settlement agreement. Oraline paid $40,000 to keep Ms. Avery quiet about discrimination she supposedly made up." Graham's jaw tightened. "Companies settle nuisance lawsuits all the time. It doesn't mean—" "Stop!" Sarah Montgomery's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Just stop, Graham. I've heard enough corporate doublespeak for one day." The room fell silent. Malcolm felt something shift in the air around the table. Other board members were nodding in agreement. David Torres cleared his throat. "I move for a formal ethics hearing tomorrow morning. Full investigation into these allegations." "Seconded," Sarah said immediately. Malcolm looked around the table as more hands rose in support. For the first time in weeks, he felt a flicker of hope growing in his chest. "Motion carries," Sarah announced. "Ms. Whitmore will be present to answer these charges. All witnesses will be heard." Through the glass conference room walls, Malcolm could see Vanessa at her desk. Her face had gone pale as she watched the board meeting through the transparent walls. Her phone buzzed repeatedly, but she seemed frozen, staring at the evidence spread across the boardroom table. After the board members filed out, Elena gathered the documents while Malcolm stood at the window overlooking Manhattan. The city stretched endlessly below them, full of people working in offices just like this one, hoping their employers would protect them instead of betraying them. "Tomorrow changes everything," Malcolm said quietly. Elena looked up from her briefcase. "Don't celebrate yet. Desperate people rarely surrender quietly." "Meaning what?" meaning Graham and Vanessa have spent the last 2 hours watching their careers dissolve in real time. They're not going to walk into that hearing and accept responsibility gracefully. Malcolm nodded, but the hope in his chest refused to dim. Tiana had agreed to testify about the airplane incident. Rochelle had agreed to share her story publicly. Board members were finally listening instead of making excuses. Down in the lobby, employees clustered around workstations, whispering about rumors filtering down from the executive floor. Someone had seen documents being carried into the boardroom. Someone else heard raised voices through closed doors. Justice felt possible for the first time in years. Late that night, after the building had emptied and security guards made their final rounds, Graham Pike sat alone in his corner office. The city lights twinkled beyond his window as he unlocked a sealed file cabinet hidden behind his personal bookshelf. Vanessa appeared in his doorway moments later, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor. "Is it time?" she asked quietly. Graham's hands found the files he'd hoped never to use. "Close the door," he said. Malcolm arrived at Auraline headquarters at 7 in the morning, 2 hours before the scheduled ethics hearing. The building felt different in the early light, quieter, more ominous. His footsteps echoed through the marble lobby as he headed toward the elevators. Elena was already waiting in his temporary office, her laptop open and her face grim. "We have a problem," she said, without looking up. Malcolm set down his coffee and moved behind her desk. The computer screen showed an error message where their carefully organized evidence files should have been. What happened? The digital evidence is gone, all of it. Server logs show the files were deleted at 3:47 this morning using administrative credentials. Elena's fingers moved across the keyboard, but each folder came up empty. Emails, audio recordings, internal memos, everything we uploaded yesterday. Malcolm felt ice form in his stomach. Who has administrative access at that hour? IT security and senior executives. Graham Pike's credentials were used. The phone on Malcolm's desk rang sharply. Elena answered while Malcolm stared at the empty folders on the screen. "It's Rochelle," Elena said, handing him the receiver. "Malcolm." Rochelle's voice sounded shaken. "I can't testify today. I'm sorry." "What happened?" "Someone left a message under my apartment door this morning. Pictures of my daughter walking to school, her school schedule, her route home." Rochelle's voice cracked. The note said, "Accidents happen to children whose mothers make poor choices." Malcolm gripped the phone tighter. "Did you call the police?" "What good will that do? These people destroyed my career once already. Now they're threatening my 8-year-old daughter." She took a shaky breath. "I can't risk it. I'm sorry, but I can't." The line went dead. Elena was already dialing another number. "Tiana's not answering her phone." 20 minutes later, they found out why. Malcolm's assistant knocked on the door with a printed email from Atlantic Airways. "Flight attendant Tiana Brooks has been suspended pending a conduct review," Malcolm read aloud. "Effective immediately. Accusations of unprofessional behavior and violation of passenger privacy policies." Elena slammed her laptop shut. "They're shutting down every witness we have." Malcolm's phone buzzed with a news alert. Then another. Then 5 more in rapid succession. His hands shook slightly as he opened the first link. Billionaire CEO targets employee after plane confrontation. The article painted him as unstable, vindictive, and dangerous. Leaked emails, expertly forged, showed him allegedly planning to destroy anyone who embarrasses me publicly. Anonymous company sources called him paranoid and increasingly erratic. The story claimed Vanessa Whitmore was an innocent victim of a powerful man's wounded ego. More alerts flooded his phone. Cable news channels picked up the story within minutes. Financial networks questioned his fitness to lead a public company. Elena was reading similar headlines on her laptop. This is coordinated. They leaked everything simultaneously across multiple outlets. The intercom buzzed. Mr. Reed, the board is requesting an emergency meeting in Conference Room A, immediately. Malcolm found 12 board members already seated around the polished table. Graham Pike stood at the head, looking somber and concerned. Malcolm, Graham said softly, we need to discuss some disturbing developments. You mean the lies you planted in the press? I mean the serious questions about your judgment and stability. The board has received multiple calls from shareholders this morning. Stock price dropped 8% in pre-market trading. Graham's tone remained gentle, almost fatherly. We're facing a crisis of confidence. David Torres shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Malcolm, these allegations about targeting employees, using company resources for personal vendettas, those documents are fabricated. Perhaps, Graham said, but the damage to shareholder confidence is real. The board must consider whether leadership changes are necessary to protect the company's interests. Sarah Martinez, who had supported Malcolm just yesterday, now avoided his eyes. The morality clause in your employment agreement requires board review if executive behavior creates significant business disruption. Malcolm looked around the table at faces that had been friendly 24 hours ago. Fear had replaced support. Corporate survival instincts had crushed moral conviction. You're removing me based on lies. We're protecting the company, Graham said quietly, just as you would do in our position. Malcolm's phone buzzed again. This time it was a legal document notification. He opened the email and felt his blood turn cold. Civil rights. Lawsuit. Vanessa Whitmore versus Malcolm Reed and Auraline International. The lawsuit claimed racial discrimination, abuse of power, and deliberate harassment following a minor misunderstanding on an airplane. Vanessa's legal team had filed in federal court 30 minutes ago. News outlets were already covering the story. Graham smiled sympathetically. She has every right to protect herself legally. The board hopes you understand our position. Malcolm stood slowly, his chair scraping against the marble floor. Through the conference room windows he could see reporters gathering outside the building entrance. Camera crews were setting up on the sidewalk. The ethics hearing? Postponed indefinitely, Graham said, given the circumstances. Malcolm walked toward the door, feeling the weight of 12 pairs of eyes following him. In the hallway, employees whispered and stared as he passed their cubicles. Some looked sympathetic. Others seemed afraid to acknowledge him at all. The elevator descended through floors of people who had believed justice was finally coming to Auraline International. Now, they watched their majority owner walking toward the lobby like a man heading to his execution. Outside, reporters spotted him immediately. Cameras flashed as voices shouted questions about the lawsuit, the leaked documents, and his fitness to run the company. Microphones thrust toward his face as he pushed through the crowd. 60 floors above, Graham Pike stood at his office window, watching Malcolm disappear into the sea of reporters and camera crews. His reflection smiled back at him from the glass. The black sedan pulled away from the chaos outside Auraline headquarters, leaving the flashing cameras and shouting reporters behind. Malcolm slumped in the passenger seat of Elena's car, staring at his hands while the city lights blurred past the window. They had everything planned, he said quietly. Every move. Elena gripped the steering wheel tighter, her knuckles white in the dashboard light. Graham's been preparing this for months. The morality clause, the leaked documents, Vanessa's lawsuit, it's all coordinated. Rochelle won't testify now. Tiana's been suspended. The digital evidence is gone. Malcolm's voice carried exhaustion that went deeper than physical tiredness. They destroyed everything. Not everything. Elena turned onto a quieter street, away from the downtown traffic. We still have the truth. Truth doesn't matter when nobody wants to hear it. Malcolm closed his eyes, feeling the weight of 12 board members who had abandoned him in less than an hour. They're scared. Stock prices, shareholder confidence, legal exposure, that's all they care about. Elena pulled into a parking garage beneath her law firm's building. The concrete walls felt like a bunker, safe from the media storm raging outside. "Malcolm, look at me." He turned toward her, seeing determination in her eyes despite everything that had collapsed around them. 20 years ago, I watched a CEO steal pension funds from 3,000 employees. The evidence was overwhelming. The board knew. The attorneys knew. Everyone knew. Elena's voice hardened. But he had connections, lawyers, political influence. He walked away with a golden parachute while families lost their retirements. That's supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to remind you why we fight. Elena leaned forward. Some battles can't be won in boardrooms or courtrooms. Sometimes you have to take the fight directly to the people. Malcolm's phone buzzed. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. "Malcolm Reed?" "Yes." "This is Tiana Brooks." Her voice was quiet, cautious. "I'm calling from an airport lounge, somewhere private." Malcolm straightened in his seat. "Tiana, I heard about your suspension. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Listen to me carefully." Tiana's tone sharpened. "There was another passenger on our flight, a man named Marcus Vale. He's a cybersecurity attorney." Elena leaned closer, trying to hear the conversation. "Marcus preserved the original footage from the plane," Tiana continued. "Not just video, audio with full metadata timestamps. Everything that happened, exactly as it happened." Malcolm felt his heartbeat quicken. Graham's people said the footage was edited. Marcus knew powerful people would try to change the story. He backed up everything to secure servers before the video went viral. Tiana paused. "But that's not all, Malcolm." "What else?" "After we landed, Marcus kept recording while he waited for baggage claim. He captured Vanessa and Graham talking near the carousel. They thought nobody was listening." Elena grabbed Malcolm's arm, her eyes widening. "They discussed intimidating witnesses," Tiana said. "Graham specifically mentioned threatening Rochelle Avery and getting me suspended. They planned the whole cover-up before you even left the airport." Malcolm's mind raced. Every move Graham had made, the leaked documents, the board pressure, Vanessa's lawsuit, all of it had been orchestrated from the moment they landed in New York. "Tiana, can you get me Marcus's contact information?" "He's already expecting your call. He wants to help, but he's worried about Graham's connections in law enforcement and media." Elena pulled out her phone, typing notes as fast as she could. "We need a platform Graham can't control, somewhere public, with media present, where the board can't bury the evidence." Malcolm looked at Elena as an idea began forming. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an elegant black invitation with gold lettering. "Auraline International Annual Shareholder, Gala tomorrow evening, 7:00 p.m., the Plaza Hotel, Grand Ballroom." Elena read the invitation and smiled slowly. "Every board member will be there, every major shareholder, financial press, business journalists. And Graham will be announcing the leadership transition," Malcolm said, understanding dawning in his voice. "He's planning to remove me publicly, in front of everyone who matters." Tiana's voice came through the phone speaker. "Malcolm, whatever you're thinking, be careful. These people have already shown they'll destroy anyone who threatens them." Malcolm stared at the invitation, seeing not just an elegant party, but a battlefield where the final confrontation would unfold. Graham wanted a public stage for Malcolm's downfall. He was about to give him exactly that. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Malcolm Reed's hotel suite at the St. Regis, casting long golden reflections across polished marble floors and dark mahogany furniture. Manhattan traffic moved far below the towering glass windows, distant and muted, while inside the suite, the atmosphere felt tense, focused, and heavy with purpose. Room service had already cleared away breakfast dishes and silver trays, but the large conference table in the center of the room remained crowded with open laptops, legal folders, printed emails, financial statements, and handwritten notes. Coffee cups sat forgotten beside stacks of evidence. Elena Marquez sat across from Malcolm, her reading glasses balanced low on her nose while she carefully reviewed contract language and corporate bylaws. The luxurious suite no longer resembled a hotel room. It had become a command center for war. Malcolm stood near the windows with his sleeves rolled up, staring down at the city below. He barely slept the night before. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Vanessa Whitmore glaring at him across the airplane aisle, raising her middle finger while passengers recorded the humiliation. But what disturbed him more was not her cruelty. It was how many people inside his own company had rushed to protect her afterward. That betrayal cut deeper. A knock sounded at the suite door. Elena opened it to Marcus Vale, who entered carrying a slim black briefcase. Marcus moved with the calm precision of a man trained to notice every detail around him. Even the way he set the briefcase down on the table felt deliberate and controlled. Malcolm stepped forward and shook his hand firmly. "Thank you for preserving the truth," Malcolm said sincerely. Marcus nodded once. "I've seen too many powerful people rewrite history when regular folks can't fight back." He unlocked the briefcase and carefully removed a sealed external drive protected inside a hardened storage case. He placed it gently on the table like evidence in a murder trial. "Everything from the flight is on here," Marcus explained. "Original timestamps, metadata, passenger recordings, audio enhancement files, and chain of custody documentation. Graham's legal team won't be able to claim manipulation or selective editing." Elena immediately leaned closer, examining the drive with sharp interest. "How strong is this, legally?" "Bulletproof," Marcus replied without hesitation. "I followed federal cybersecurity preservation protocols from the moment I realized the footage might become evidence. Every file was mirrored through 3 independent encrypted servers. Even if they attempt to argue tampering, the metadata proves authenticity down to the second." Malcolm exhaled slowly for what felt like the first time all morning. For days, Graham Pike had manipulated reporters, board members, and shareholders with carefully crafted lies. Finally, Malcolm had something undeniable. Another soft knock interrupted the room. Tiana Brooks stepped carefully into the suite after Elena opened the door. She looked exhausted, dark circles visible beneath her eyes, but there was determination in the way she carried herself. Her airline uniform was gone, replaced with simple jeans and a navy sweater that made her seem less like a flight attendant and more like an ordinary woman caught in a storm she never asked for. Malcolm offered her a seat immediately. "How are you holding up?" he asked gently. Tiana let out a humorless laugh before answering honestly. "Angry." She rubbed her hands together nervously before continuing. "My supervisor called this morning. They're recommending termination for failure to maintain passenger safety standards. 20 years with that airline. Perfect reviews, never a complaint. And now they're throwing me away to protect Vanessa Whitmore." The bitterness in her voice filled the room. Elena reached into her briefcase and handed Tiana a small digital recorder. "Tell us everything," Elena said calmly. "Start from the moment Vanessa saw Malcolm's boarding pass. Then explain every conversation you've had with airline management since the plane landed." Tiana nodded and pressed record. She spoke slowly at first, carefully describing Vanessa's escalating hostility, the insults, the demands to move Malcolm, the threats against the crew, and finally the moment she raised her middle finger directly into Malcolm's face, while passengers gasped around them. As she continued, her voice grew steadier and stronger. Then she described the pressure afterward. "They wanted me to say it was a misunderstanding over seating assignments," Tiana explained. "They said the media exaggerated everything. When I refused to lie, they suspended me pending investigation." Malcolm felt anger tightening in his chest again. These people destroyed lives as casually as signing paperwork. Before anyone could respond, another knock came at the door. Rochelle Avery entered cautiously, clutching a thick folder tightly against her chest. Her eyes darted around the suite as though she expected Graham's people to burst through the walls at any moment. Even after years away from Auraline, fear still followed her everywhere. "I brought copies of everything," Rochelle said quietly as she sat down. "Performance reviews before and after I filed complaints, emails, HR reports, internal messages Vanessa thought nobody would ever see." She slid the thick folder across the table toward Elena. As Elena reviewed the documents page by page, her expression hardened visibly. "This establishes a clear pattern of retaliation," Elena said. Rochelle pointed toward a highlighted email. "That's where Vanessa called me a troublemaker. She told senior managers I was unstable and difficult. After that, promotions disappeared. Meetings stopped. People avoided me in hallways like I was contagious." Her voice cracked slightly. "They destroyed my reputation piece by piece." Malcolm studied Rochelle carefully as she relived years of humiliation. "You stayed silent for 3 years," he said quietly. "Why come forward now?" Rochelle looked directly at him. "Because you're the first person powerful enough to actually fight them," she replied. "And because if I stay silent, they'll keep doing this to other people." Silence settled across the room. Elena finally closed the folder and began making calls to federal contacts she trusted inside regulatory agencies. Her side of the conversations was cold, precise, and entirely professional. Malcolm heard phrases like witness tampering, obstruction, retaliation, conspiracy, securities fraud. An hour later, Elena ended the final call and turned toward the group. "Federal investigators are already watching Auraline," she revealed. "They've suspected Graham Pike of financial misconduct for months. What we've gathered today gives them grounds for immediate action." Marcus carefully sealed the digital drives into evidence bags, while Rochelle and Tiana exchanged nervous glances. "Are we informing the board?" Elena asked Malcolm. Malcolm slowly shook his head. "No," he said firmly. "Graham expects me to follow corporate procedure, file complaints, request hearings, negotiate quietly, while he manipulates the board behind closed doors." He placed both hands on the conference table and looked at every person in the room. "Tomorrow night, he plans to remove me publicly in front of shareholders, executives, and cameras." Malcolm closed the final evidence folder with calm finality. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice low and steady, "they lose in public." The Auraline International Shareholder Gala filled the grand ballroom of the Meridian Hotel like a golden ocean of wealth and power. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across marble columns, while 500 investors, executives, and board members mingled beneath towering windows overlooking Central Park. Camera crews positioned themselves strategically around the room as financial reporters checked their equipment. Graham Pike stood near the elevated stage, adjusting his silver tie and reviewing notes with his assistant. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit that emphasized his authority as interim CEO. Tonight would cement his control over Auraline permanently. Vanessa Whitmore positioned herself prominently near the front of the crowd, stunning in a crimson-red dress that matched her confident smile. She spoke quietly with several board members, laughing gracefully as if the airplane incident had never happened. Her makeup was flawless, her hair perfectly styled. She looked like someone who had already won. "Ladies and gentlemen," the event coordinator announced through the sound system, "please take your seats for tonight's special presentation." The crowd settled into rows of elegant chairs facing the stage. Graham climbed the steps with practiced ease, his smile broad and reassuring. He gripped the podium microphone and waited for silence. "Good evening, shareholders and friends of Auraline International," Graham began. "Tonight marks a crucial moment in our company's future." Polite applause filled the ballroom. Vanessa clapped enthusiastically from the third row, her eyes bright with anticipation. Graham continued smoothly. "Over the past week, troubling concerns have emerged regarding leadership decisions that may compromise shareholder confidence and company stability." Several board members nodded gravely. Graham had spent days preparing them for this moment. "Recent events have demonstrated a pattern of impulsive, emotional decision-making that threatens our corporate reputation," Graham said, his tone growing more serious. "Personal grievances have been elevated above business judgment." Camera operators focused their lenses on Graham as he built his case. Financial reporters scribbled notes furiously. "Therefore, the board has asked me to address questions about majority ownership and its responsibilities to all stakeholders," Graham announced. The room grew quieter. This was the setup for Malcolm's removal. Vanessa's smile widened slightly. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. "Before we proceed with tonight's crucial vote regarding leadership restructuring," Graham began. The ballroom doors opened with a sharp sound that echoed across the marble floor. Malcolm Reed entered calmly, wearing a dark navy suit and walking with quiet confidence. Elena Marquez followed beside him, carrying a leather briefcase. Behind them came Tiana Brooks in professional attire, her airline uniform replaced by a simple black dress. Rochelle Avery walked beside Marcus Vale, both looking determined despite their obvious nervousness. The crowd turned to watch as Malcolm's group moved down the center aisle toward the stage. Whispers rippled through the room as investors recognized faces from recent news coverage. Vanessa's confident smile flickered and began to fade. Her hands tightened around her champagne glass. Graham's practiced composure wavered for just a moment before he regained control. "Mr. Reed, this is a private shareholder event. Please take your seat so we can continue." Malcolm reached the front of the ballroom and stopped directly before the stage. "I'm requesting 5 minutes before any vote takes place." "That's not how tonight's agenda works," Graham replied firmly. "Please sit down." Board member Patricia Caldwell stood from her chair in the front row. "Graham, as majority owner, Mr. Reed has the right to address shareholders." "This is highly irregular," Graham protested. "5 minutes," called another board member from across the room. "Let him speak." More voices joined in agreement. Graham found himself trapped by basic corporate protocol. Vanessa's face had gone pale beneath her makeup. She stared at Tiana and Rochelle with growing fear. Malcolm climbed the stage steps without waiting for Graham's permission. Elena handed him a small remote device as he approached the podium. "Thank you," Malcolm said into the microphone. His voice was calm and clear. "What you're about to see will explain everything." He raised the remote toward the large screens positioned around the ballroom. Graham stepped forward quickly. This is completely out of order. The screens flashed white, then filled with crystal-clear video footage. The airplane cabin appeared in perfect detail. Passengers filled first-class seats as Malcolm walked down the aisle carrying his duffel bag. Vanessa sat by the window in her business attire, watching his approach with visible disgust. The ballroom fell completely silent. On screen, Vanessa's voice rang out clearly. "No, absolutely not. I'm not sitting next to him." The footage continued playing as Vanessa's anger escalated. Her cruel words filled the elegant ballroom while 500 witnesses watched in stunned silence. Then came the moment that made several people gasp. Vanessa raised her hand directly toward Malcolm's face, her middle finger extended in unmistakable defiance. The ballroom remained frozen in horrified silence as the airplane footage continued playing. Every cruel word Vanessa had spoken echoed through the elegant space with devastating clarity. Her voice filled the room as she questioned Malcolm's right to sit in first class, mocked his appearance, and demanded his removal. The camera captured Malcolm's incredible restraint. He never raised his voice, never argued back, never lost his composure even when Vanessa's finger pointed directly at his face in public humiliation. When the airplane video ended, Malcolm turned to Marcus Vale, who stepped forward with his laptop connected to the projection system. "What you just witnessed happened 3 days ago," Malcolm said into the microphone. "What you're about to hear happened 30 minutes later, at baggage claim." New audio began playing through the ballroom speakers. The voices were instantly recognizable. Vanessa's voice came through clearly. "Graham, we have a problem. That man I had removed from first class? He's Malcolm Reed." Graham's response was equally clear. "Jesus Christ, Vanessa, how bad was it?" "Bad, really bad. There's video." "Okay, listen carefully. We need to move fast before this spreads. First, we discredit any witnesses. That flight attendant who helped him? Get her suspended. Find something. Anything. Second, if any former employees try surfacing, we shut them down hard. What about Rochelle? She's been quiet for 2 years. If she talks, we destroy her completely. Blacklist her from every company in the city. Make sure she knows we'll come after her family too if we have to." The ballroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Several investors stood from their tables, faces twisted in disgust. Marcus switched to financial documents projected on the screens. Bank records, settlement agreements, and internal emails filled the displays. These records show 17 discrimination settlements paid by Orline International over the past 4 years, Malcolm announced, all involving complaints against Ms. Whitmore, all buried by Mr. Pike to protect company image and his own position. The documents revealed everything. Graham had used company funds to silence victims while promoting Vanessa repeatedly. He'd hidden the payments from board oversight and falsified ethics reports. Board member Patricia Caldwell shot to her feet. "Graham, is this true?" Graham's face had gone ashen. These documents are taken out of context. $47,000 to silence Sarah Martinez after Vanessa called her too ethnic for client meetings. Malcolm read directly from the screen. $62,000 to James Patterson after Vanessa blocked his promotion, saying clients prefer working with real Americans. The room exploded with angry voices. Investors began shouting questions. Board members backed away from Graham as if he carried a disease. "This is character assassination!" Graham yelled into his microphone, but his voice was drowned out by the crowd's fury. Elena stepped forward and handed Malcolm a thick manila envelope. "Federal investigators have been provided copies of all evidence," Malcolm announced, "including proof of witness intimidation, financial fraud, and conspiracy to obstruct justice." As if summoned by his words, 3 federal agents in dark suits entered through the ballroom's main doors. They moved purposefully toward the stage while the crowd parted before them. Graham saw them coming and tried to leave through the side exit, but another agent was already waiting there. "Graham Pike, you're under arrest for conspiracy, witness tampering, and financial fraud," the lead agent announced loud enough for everyone to hear. The ballroom watched in stunned silence as handcuffs clicked around Graham's wrists. His expensive suit and confident demeanor couldn't protect him from the perp walk in front of 500 witnesses. Cameras flashed as reporters captured every moment of his humiliation. With Graham being escorted away, all attention turned to Vanessa. She stood alone near the front tables, her red dress making her impossible to miss. Her earlier confidence had completely evaporated. She looked around desperately, searching for allies who were no longer there. Board members avoided her eyes. Executives she'd worked with for years suddenly found their phones fascinating. Finally, she walked toward the stage where Malcolm still stood at the podium. "Malcolm," she called out, her voice shaking, "I need to apologize. What happened on that plane? I was stressed. I wasn't thinking clearly. I never meant any of those things I said." The microphone picked up every word, broadcasting her plea throughout the ballroom and to the cameras recording everything. "I'm sorry," she continued desperately. "I'm truly, deeply sorry. Can we please talk privately? Can we work this out?" Malcolm looked down at her from the stage. His expression remained calm, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "You were never sorry about what you did," he said clearly into the microphone. "You were sorry I mattered." 2 weeks later, the executive floor of Auraline International looked completely different. Gone were the mahogany doors that had hidden corruption. Glass walls now let everyone see inside the offices where decisions were made. Malcolm stood in the main conference room, addressing a packed crowd of employees, board members, and reporters. The same screens that had exposed Vanessa's cruelty now displayed organizational charts showing Auraline's new structure. Effective immediately, Vanessa Whitmore's employment with Auraline International has been terminated, Malcolm announced. All benefits, stock options, and severance packages have been revoked due to breach of contract and criminal conduct. Several employees in the back of the room actually applauded. Others smiled quietly, finally feeling safe enough to show their relief. Graham Pike has been permanently removed from all positions within the company. His interim CEO role is dissolved. The board has voted unanimously to make these changes permanent, pending the outcome of federal investigations. Malcolm's voice carried no anger or satisfaction, just facts delivered with the same calm authority he'd shown on the airplane. "More importantly," he continued, "we are implementing immediate changes to prevent this from happening again." The screen shifted to show new policies and procedures. Every bullet point represented a lesson learned from years of hidden abuse. First, all discrimination complaints will be handled by an independent third-party firm, not internal human resources. Second, any employee who reports misconduct will receive automatic legal protection and cannot be retaliated against in any way. Third, settlement agreements will no longer include silence clauses that protect the company at the expense of victims. Elena, now serving as Auraline's new general counsel, stepped forward with a thick folder. "We've also established a victim compensation fund," she announced. "Every employee who suffered under the previous system will receive full financial restitution, regardless of previous settlements." The room stirred with emotion. Some employees wiped their eyes, others sat straighter, as if weight had been lifted from their shoulders. "Rochelle Avery," Malcolm called out, looking toward the middle of the crowd. Rochelle stood slowly, still not quite believing this was real. She wore a Navy business suit and carried herself with the confidence she'd lost years ago. "Ms. Avery has been reinstated to her previous management position with full back pay, benefits, and healthcare restoration. Additionally, she will lead our new employee advocacy department, ensuring no one else suffers what she endured. The applause this time was thunderous. Rochelle's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled as colleagues she'd never met welcomed her back to a company that had finally decided to protect its people. Tiana Brooks, Malcolm continued, and heads turned toward the woman sitting near the front. Tiana stood gracefully, wearing the same professional composure that had served her well as a flight attendant. Ms. Brooks chose truth over personal safety when it mattered most. We are honored to offer her the position of Corporate Ethics Director. Her job will be to make sure employees always have a voice, and that voice is always heard. Tiana nodded acceptance, her smile reflecting both gratitude and determination. "These changes aren't just policies," Malcolm said, addressing the entire room. "They're promises. Auraline International will never again be a place where power protects cruelty, or where speaking truth costs someone their livelihood." After the meeting, Malcolm worked late into the evening, signing documents that formalized every commitment he'd made. Each signature represented someone who would never again face what Rochelle had endured. The next morning, he found himself at Los Angeles International Airport again, boarding another cross-country flight. He wore the same simple style that had triggered Vanessa's rage: dark jeans, a comfortable sweater, and his worn leather duffel bag. Walking down the aisle toward his seat, Malcolm noticed other passengers glancing at him. The viral video had made his face recognizable, though most people were too polite to stare openly. A middle-aged businessman in the aisle seat saw him approaching and immediately stood up. "Mr. Reed?" the man said nervously. "I recognize you from the news. Look, I have the window seat, but if you'd prefer more space, I'd be happy to switch. I mean, after what happened before—" The man's voice trailed off awkwardly, but his offer was genuine. He was trying to be kind, to somehow make up for the cruelty Malcolm had faced. Malcolm smiled warmly, appreciating the gesture without needing special treatment. "No need," he said, settling into the seat beside the nervous passenger. "This time, we travel like human beings." I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.